Long hours, endless emails, and saying yes to everything can drain your energy and derail your leadership.
You are like a race car. You are a piece of equipment, and you are designed for great performance. But there's no such thing as somebody who never pulls over.
Renowned clinical psychologist Dr. Henry Cloud has sold over 20 million books on leadership and helped top executives achieve peak performance and foster healthier cultures.
You've got to become an expert in leadership just as much as you are in whatever your field is and whatever got you.
Conquer burnout, dismantle frustration, and regain control of your time and energy on today's Curious CEO.
Every person in the organization needs to feel like I am free and empowered to do something, and when I do it, it matters.
Dr. Cloud, welcome to the show.
Well, it's good to be with you guys. I love what you do, and it's good to hang out and catch up.
Great to see you. Well, thanks for doing this. Let me ask you this. How did you go from clinical psychology to helping leaders become more successful? How did that happen?
Wait, I knocked on the wrong door, basically. No, shit, I'm dead serious. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I went and knocking on doors, and my first job was in a leadership consulting firm. And they work with CEOs and teams and high performers. But I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but leaders have issues sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to shrink in the house. And so that's how it started. But I fell in love with leadership. Ended up doing my doctoral dissertation in leadership personality. And so from the day I started, I made two parallel tracks, one in the clinical world and one in the leadership world. And what I figured out was those aren't two worlds. What we're talking about is a human. And it's how humans function in all their contexts. So there aren't many CEOs I work with where we're only talking about strategy, execution, leadership stuff. We're talking about the leaders that have to pull that off with other people in reality. And that's when you get into the personal, makeup with people. So that's how it happened. And then I started a company. My business uses after 5 or 6 years were a little stagnant, and I wanted to do something that was on mission. So I wanted to do one psychiatric hospital, and did one, and that worked, and did another one. Ended up with treatment centers and hospital units in about 45 cities in the Western United States and 4 states, and I ran that company for a long time. And then solved it and said, what do I want to do? And so I want to work with leaders. So that's what I've been doing ever since.
That's great. Well, it's nothing like having the theory, being the coach, and then jumping into the entrepreneurial world yourself. And I think that's why you got so much great content and great stories, and it's so practical. Our audience are really folks who they're trying to lead themselves and lead other people. And a lot of times that's just, it's human engineering, psychology being such a big piece for ourselves and for others. What would you say are the things that you've noticed, good or bad, in leadership, or things that you see that are symptoms of poor leadership, or things when you come in, you're like, we got to, this is common and we've got to change it towards here. What are some of those things that you've seen?
Well, you start at the 50,000 foot level. And I think one of the things that you always see is that we tend to build things in our own image. And so, you have some leaders that are great visionaries, but they're not very linear in getting something from here to there. And so their companies have great vision and inspiration, but they're kind of floundering because it's kind of built around them instead of understanding as a leader what the components are, even that aren't your own, bed or strengths, that your business has got to have, and then making sure all those happen. And so I'd say that's one of the other one, Darwin, is that you could almost say the ones that fail, and this is why it's so great what you guys do in coaching. The ones that fail, the leaders tend to be closed systems. And a closed system, if you go to physics, second law of thermodynamics, law of entropy, things get more chaotic and energy runs down and worse over time, unless you open up the system. And what you got to open up the system to is new energy, and intelligence to organize that energy to get things better. And so leaders that have opened up the system of their own heads, first of all, to take in outside of what they know and what they can, propel forward with, they're the ones that do well. And that's what coaching does. And that's what good boards do. And that's what good mentors do. And that's what going to conferences do. And then bringing those into your company, that it makes all the difference in the world.
How do you move someone? Because, I think it's very hard. Like, a lot of people become successful because they're a good me. I'm good at the job. As you said, you create a business in your image, you become successful, and then you have to hire other people, and they don't do it the way you do it. We were having a conversation. We got a little carried away here before the shot, because we started talking about golf, and everybody was coming in going, what are they talking about? And one of the reasons is because I was like trying to swing the golf. Guy was trying to have me swing a golf club the way I'm not designed to swing it. It just doesn't work for me. So how do you open up somebody's system? How do you open up a leader's mind to go, look, this works for you. You've built the company in this image, but we've got to get these folks kind of swinging the club and doing the thing the way they're designed to do it. What's the process? What's the path to accomplish that with the leader?
Well, it's not, it's like a golf game. You talk to, I love to hit the driver, right? Well, you also got to be able to play out of a bunker. You got to hit putts. You got to make sure your equipment works. And what they don't understand is when they go into business, a lot of times there's something they do well, and there's something they like to do, but the business requires a lot of different functions. And so I think the first thing, when people start businesses, that they've got to understand, well, there's two things. One is you got there because you're great at sales, or you're great at marketing, or you're great at technology, or you're great at finance. But then because you're so great at that, people have decided to invest in you and follow you, and you're great at that. But now you have a second job that you've never been prepared for, and that's leading people in an organization from this point to that point. And that's its own science. And so I think, it just behooves all of them you've got to become an expert in leadership just as much as you are in whatever your field is and whatever got you there. So that's one part of it. And as you do that, what you're going to realize is that a business is more than what you do well. There's different, factors that end up making things successful, and you just have to learn those. And the big deal here, you're not going to do them all, and you're not good at all of them, but you've got to get the right people, and you've got to get rid of the wrong people. Personally, I'm told so many that I'm doing, I'll do the interviews and some mess, and sometimes I'll go back and say, you're one firing away from success. Everything's in place. You got one, or you're one hire away from success because there's a missing component that you don't have.
Why is it hard for us to, for me personally, in my leadership journey, I've had a lot of opportunities to learn what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. And I don't particularly have a problem receiving feedback, or I try to encourage it from the team to tell me like, hey, how are you experiencing me right now? Like, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Because I need to know what your experience is rather than my experiences. What are some helpful ways that we can get feedback from people or create an environment of to encourage that? And also as leaders, how do we become okay with that? Like, how do we become, because some people might not be okay with getting that feedback, but you're not going to grow as a leader, and you're not going to be able to serve others or get the most out of them. Do you have any ways you can encourage us to maybe take on that feedback or create that culture of people being willing to come forward and contribute to your own development?
Well, you've hit on one of the most important components of it, and that is leaders' own, openness to hearing and receiving something. There's a cognitive process called assimilation and accommodation, which means that for our conceptual understanding of anything and our ability to think about things well, this gets into how the brain works. First thing you've got to do is you've got to be able to take in new data, that you don't know. Somebody says,
you tend to push people too hard, or you don't tend to push people hard enough, or whatever it is. You might not have known that piece of information about yourself. First thing, or it might be about the market. Somebody's giving you information or about the product. And the first thing is you've got to be able to assimilate. You got to be open enough to where you even let the information in instead of, we've seen leaders do this. Well, that's not true. No, they instantly, it's like a video game shooting something down. That ain't let the information get in. And then secondly, when it gets in, you've got to be flexible enough to accommodate it to your view of reality. And that's how we grow. Now, that doesn't mean you agree with everything, but you at least accommodate it to understand that they may be wrong, but it is true that there are people that have that view. And if I don't accommodate that into the people, how I'm going to lead them from here to there, et cetera. So in one sense, you're talking about cognitive rigidity and curiosity and openness. But I hate to say this, but a lot of times you're talking about narcissism. Because some people, if anything comes their way that doesn't make them look good or make them feel smart or make them, have the image they want to do, then you get defensiveness. And that's like punching the doctor in the face. It'd be like an airplane pilot not liking the feedback that the altimeter is giving them, and taking a hammer and hitting it. Well, no, I'm at 30,000 feet. I think, no, you're wrong. Well, why would you be so stupid to be arrogant? And so, humility is not about self-deprecation. Humility is about being right-sized in your skin. And that's a big deal. That's just a big deal.
I feel like I've got so many questions. I'm like, we could go into deep waters here, but how do we deal? Like, narcissism is, it seems like it's on the rampage. I mean, how do you deal with a narcissistic leader? How have you had, or how do we deal with narcissists? Or should you deal with them? Well,
that's
a book.
They make great face, man. You can put them on the stage and, everybody's attracted to them and how wonderful they are. It just depends on what you have to get out of them, when you're talking about dealing with them. But basically there's what people don't understand. This word narcissism has gotten useless today. Everybody's, they're narcissistic. My husband or my wife is narcissistic, and it doesn't mean anything anymore. Yeah. And as a diagnostician, when I'm working with a board, with a CEO, or they might have some narcissism that's getting in the way, or you got a direct report, or you want a investor or a client. It's really important to know, first of all, what outcome do you want? Because sometimes, we go through some difficult treatments because there's a certain outcome we want, and then you learn to manage them along the way. But there are some things that it's just not worth it. It's really not worth it. B, they're probably putting a lid on things anyway because they tend to maximize themselves and minimize everybody else. And so you probably got a built-in problem there. You have information flow problems, you have little fiefdoms, you have divisiveness, all of them. But the big thing is this. I think it's very important when you're dealing with somebody that they think is narcissistic. This is something where the diagnostic world doesn't do well enough now, is you've got to determine what kind of narcissist you're dealing with. There are some people that are narcissistic. They got to feel good about themselves. They're easily wounded. They got to prop them up. And underneath that, they're just a vulnerable little boy or little girl with a lot of shame, right? Yeah. There's another kind that aren't vulnerable at all. Their grandiosity is about they want to rule the world and they don't care about anybody gets in the way. And the best thing to do with them is lawyers, guns, and money, like Warren Zevon and sang a song about. You go into protection mode.
Yeah. So one you have a chance with and the other one there's no chance. Just knowing the difference.
That's exactly right.
Let me ask you, because like I mean, that's deep. Well, I'm sure we could go on for days and days about that. And you say everybody's labels labels somebody as something.
I'm not trying to push product here, but I wrote a book called Necessary Endings, and in there's a chapter called The Wise, the Fools, and the Evil, and it's a little bit of a diagnostic of what kind of person are you dealing with and how you deal differently with them. You got to know.
And I think one of the other things, and we have in our coaching program, our real strengths profiles, what really allows people to manage their own strengths. Like, as you're saying, you can't really do much about somebody else in a lot of ways, but you can manage your own attributes, your own emotions, your own words, and what you think, say, and do. So I like that. It's like, just focus on yourself and kind of come back to what you can control. Let me ask you about, because there's so many books that you've written. And by the way, before we get on here, I now have to go buy another 2 and read them. So you've already made money out of me because I'm like, oh, I need to read that book. But you've been prolific in your writing. One of the, and our coaches have to read Boundaries as part of their training because obviously that is coaching. And everybody on here is at some form, if you're going to be a leader, you're going to have to be a coach, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to be able to work with people. You're going to have to be able to identify their strengths, how they complement you. But when it comes to boundaries, I think it's very difficult as we run businesses to keep our boundaries, our personal boundaries, our budgets, our time. There's a lot involved. And as a lot of folks here, there've been great salespeople who now have built really good businesses and now they're onboarding people into their business. What are some tips that we can do utilize as leaders to maintain our boundaries with our teams and with our home life and with ourselves?
Yeah, there you're talking about your personal boundaries.
Yeah, well, I see them kind of like work takes over. It's like next thing you're working 7 days a week, and you're like, man, this business has me. I don't have it. But it's kind of, and I think it kind of crosses both worlds, right? You'll sacrifice your own workouts. You'll sacrifice your own diet. You'll sacrifice yourself for your kids. So how do we implement some boundaries where we can have that personal and professional boundaries in place?
Yeah, one of the things that's really important, I think, is you've got to figure out is what you're doing. Whenever we feel overstretched, that's not necessarily bad because there are seasons where we may be overstretched. I've talked to any accountant on April the 3rd. They don't want their life to look like that, right? Mm. So, or sometimes in startup mode, or you got a product launch, or whatever it is, you're not doing anything bad or wrong by having a season of what you're basically doing is you're highly focusing. We only have the same amount of time every day, but we've decided to take all of our time and energy, or a lot of it, and we're going to focus for a season just on the business because that's what it's demanding. The problem is that's not sustainable. So you always have to ask the question, when I'm overstretched, is this intentionally and purposeful for a season? Mm-hmm. Because if it's not, you're not building a business. The business you're supposed to be building has got to be able to function without you touching everything.
Yeah.
And so I would start to ask at that point, are you building really unsustainable patterns, not only for you and the business, but there's something gone wrong in the way you've actually designed it. And that's where you got to really look at, have I really defined, Jim Collins said, what seats do I need on the bus first? Not the people, but the seats. And then what people in the seats.
Right.
If a pilot steps on a commercial airliner and has decided, I'm going to fly the plane and I'm going to be a navigator and I'm going to serve the drinks and I'm going to fuel it. You're not defining your role. One of the best CEOs I ever have known, and I can mention his name, but I won't, but built something huge. Mm-hmm. He said, when I was CEO, I realized my job description every day was to whatever I did that day to never have to do it again. Mm-hmm. So he could hand it off, figure out what the pattern was, He could train it, he could teach and all that, because he said, I want to be focused on where we're going and not doing something I've already done. And I can get that done, and I can train it, and I can delegate it. And that's actually the way that God designed our brains. You know, you focus on something when you're learning how to drive. You focus to learn, I got to steer, I got to brake, all this. But they gradually, that gets delegated in lower parts of the organization so we can focus on and give attention to the next thing.
Well, just from what you said, I have now 2 light bulbs going off, and I want to, if you're okay, I want to go down one and then come back to this, you know, transition of trust. Because what I'm here, it's like, if you're going to give it to somebody else, there has to be trust involved. But before that, because the Buffini brothers have been known to bump into burnout over the last 28 years. And I'm literally coming out from a burnout season where I kind of fried myself. Okay. And I know better intellectually. I know I had some good routines in place, this, that, and the other, but how can we know the signs of burnout, and how can we make sure we bounce back out of it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the main diagnostics that I always look for is, are you burned out or are you tired? You know, you go to the gym, I went once, and you got a trainer. Wait, you know, you do reps and you do reps. Well, you get to a point where you can't, after 9 or 10 or certain, and they go, you got one more, you got one more. You might have one more, but you don't have 20 more, right?
Yeah.
Your muscle is fatigued. It's all it's got. Okay, so what do?
Yeah.
You skip a day, you come back, rest, regenerated it, took care of it, and now you're good to go. You're not burned out, you're tired. So when you take some time off and truly unplug and rest and recreate, we call that recreation. The question is, does recreation and recreation and rest, does that fix it? And now you're ready to go attacking again. That's different than being burned out. When a candle is burned out, there's no more wax. So you rest and you come back, and that batteries are, it's just isn't there. And so then we have to look at, what are the dynamics that have really degenerated your soul? Something's going on inside that has gotten rid of passion and energy, and it very well could be the relational dynamics that are going on. And maybe you're asking to be responsible for things you can't control. For example, that other people have control of you and you're being manipulated, or there's 1,000 dynamics that tie into our brains that erode. You know, how does somebody fall in love with somebody great and slowly that relationship erodes? It's because of the dynamics that are going on, and leaders find themselves in business dynamics. And if you don't address those dynamics, the wax can get depleted. I mean, you can get burned out. So
what do leaders because also not only that, but we're working with people, we're leading people who are kind of between tired and burned out sometimes. We're dealing with clients sometimes that go between they're tired or they burnt out. So what are some of the things that we can do to help ourselves to get out of the burnout mode? Because I know we can go for a rest, I can jump on a boat to get over the fatigue, but
there we go. We can do that. Well, let me give you a few things really, really quickly that'll really help with let's call it the psychological and emotional aspects of burnout. One is, you got to ask yourself, is the way my business is set up, is it disconnecting me from fuel sources to my soul emotionally through relationships? In other words, do you have to be on always so you can't be vulnerable enough to where you let down with anybody that can feed your soul? Or it may be quantitative, it may be qualitative, but somehow we are made to be connected. And if we're not connected, and that's in our business and outside of our business. So I would ask, does the business and the way the teams work and the way your people work, is that a place of deep, sustaining emotional connectedness? Because if it is, you're going to thrive, cause each other to thrive every day, right? It'd be like you walk into a halftime at a football game, you're down 12 points, and if everybody's emotionally guarded and cut off from everybody, you don't pull each other out of the doldrums. You don't, get each other going. So how have I designed things that's causing disconnectedness in the business? Number one. Number two, does everybody have a good sense of autonomy and freedom to have agency and put their hands to the steering wheel and control something that drives the needle? Because if they don't, why are they coming to work? Every person in the organization needs to feel like I am free and empowered to do something, and when I do it, it matters. See, this falls down in a couple of places that can lead to some burnout. One is, I know it's got to be done, and I can do it, but I don't really have permission, or I'm manipulated by somebody, or guilted by somebody to do this instead of that, or got too much bureaucracy above me. Whatever it is, I'm not free to exercise my agency, okay? Secondly, I'm free, all right, but what they're giving me to do, it doesn't move the needle on anything. I'm just busy.
Yeah.
I'm not winning, or I'm not causing us to win. So that can erode somebody's soul.
Great stuff.
How is everything I do tied to the mission? Even with the receptionists, they should know that. And they should have that celebrated. The way I answered this phone was back when we used to have phones, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Sense of purpose.
It makes a difference.
Sense of mission. Sense of winning.
It makes
contribution.
a difference.
Yeah, and I think
Thirdly,
intention. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, this is great. You got more. Fabulous.
Yeah, well, we're not limited in how many ways we can get screwed up, right? So a third dynamic is, we all have ideals. And we have the way we want things to be. We got a goal. We got a number we want to hit. We want the way that meeting ought to go. We want the way the job ought to go. We've got to have that. And then reality is that we don't hit it all the time. We make mistakes. We have failure. We screw it up. Or we do okay, but we don't do great. Okay? So this gap that we call reality in between the perfect and where I find myself, how is that gap metabolized by me, the people I work with, the people I work for? There are ways to metabolize that gap that can be energizing and actually cause improvement and growth. And there are ways that gap is experienced that can cause more than burnout, even abject misery. And so we got to look at, am I in my own head and interpersonally with my team and my boss and whoever it is, am I locked in to a basically off with my head if I make a mistake or we don't win or whatever, or are we in a growth culture that gets curious about, we didn't hit the number, let's figure this out, we got to, that's all right, and get back in. How does that work? So we need the worst thing we can have in a business is toxic fear. The best thing we can have in a business is fear of reality. I should be afraid that if revenues aren't getting better, we got to close the doors. That's a good thing to fear.
Yep.
My boss screaming at me or making me feel like, you know what? That's probably not going to help me get more revenue. In fact, it's going to diminish brain function. So that kind of thing is another one. And then the last one, and we'll get off this topic, but I'm just giving a few psychological things. Am I perceiving myself as an equal to everybody in the building? We got a lot of, I don't mean your roles are equal or have equal authority. You're not sitting at a table with the CEO and that team doesn't feel like we're all equal adults here with something to contribute, and everybody's brain is valued for its different contribution, then we're playing people-pleasing parent-child games, and that is not going to win a Super Bowl. And so we got to find out, are we harnessing people's best strengths, their best minds, and do they have permission to speak those at the table and contribute, and are we using them? And if you're, if you feel like you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, and you better find another one, and you shouldn't feel bad for not being the smartest person about a particular thing. And that's the only way things get better.
Wow, love that. Brilliant. What I'm taking away from that, though, as well, is, the great Irish philosopher, Conor McGregor, he said, you're either winning or you're learning. And what I'm taking away from what you just said is that as a leader, my job is to create an enthusiasm around where the gap was. To create an enthusiasm, like, what did we learn from that? If we made a mistake, what did you learn, and what can we do to make it better or implement it? Is that's what you're saying?
Exactly. And all mistakes aren't the same. There are some mistakes that are truly mistakes we should not make. I already know how to do it. It's, we should not make a mistake, for example, in spilling gas on your car when you go to the gas station, right? So if we're making those kind of mistakes, let's not make those. There's nothing to learn. We got a performance problem, or we got carelessness, or we need to change the system.
Right.
There's some mistakes that have to do with factors that happen that we need to kind of figure out, what do we not see? And we shouldn't make those mistakes, but we didn't quite, is unknown unknowns or whatever it is, but they are mistakes we never want to make again. Right? There's a third kind of mistake that we should make every day on purpose. And that's when we're trying something new and innovate. Let's try this. We don't know if it's going to work or not. And if it fails, that's what we call an experiment.
It's true. Well, listen, I literally could talk to you for days and days and days. It's absolutely fabulous. Great content. One of the things I was leading to when the second light bulb was this whole process of the transition of trust, where you can hand it over to the people, you can create this environment. What you're talking about is trust. So I know that's one of your most recent books was actually on trust, and knowing when to give it and knowing when to withhold it. So I'm going to highly recommend that people check out that book and order it today, because I think it kind of encapsulates a lot of what you're talking about.
Trust fuels everything, and without it, you have a very, very small life. I was sitting on an airplane when I was doing some research, actually, when I was writing the book, and the guy next to me says, "So what are you doing?" I said, "I'm researching trust." He goes, "Oh, I don't trust anybody." I said, "Really?" He said, "No, I learned a long time ago, you can't trust people. I only trust myself." And I'm like, "Well, I'm a psychologist, and you're crazy."
And you're not flying this airplane either.
That was the point. I said, "Dude, look out the window. Don't tell me you don't trust anybody."
Yeah.
I mean, you'll never scale anything. But the problem is knowing who to trust, when, for what, in what context. Because when we make mistakes in trust, it costs.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts.
Listen,
you've been very generous with your time. Are you okay with hanging back and just come backstage with me and answer some questions for our fabulous leadership coaching clients?
Absolutely.
You're so generous with your time. For everybody else, I want to thank you for tuning in today. I highly recommend that you pick up his book, Trust, and most of his books, in my opinion. And I'd also recommend checking out his website, leadyou.tv and boundaries.me. He has great leadership resources out there for you that will help you on your journey. On the next Curious CEO, Captain David Marquet will be joining us. He's a best-selling author, speaker, and retired captain in the U.S. Navy. He'll show us how to build an environment where the people on your team can contribute and feel empowered. So until next time, stay curious, my friends.
Thank you for joining us on this month's Curious CEO. If you're ready to take your leadership to the next level, maybe it's time for you to work with a Buffini Certified Leadership Coach. Our coaches will help you identify and leverage your natural leadership style, develop a strong organizational culture, improve recruiting and retention, and increase the profitability of your business. And among the benefits of our leadership coaching membership is a backstage pass to the Curious CEO that allows you to ask your questions directly to Dermot and his amazing guests. If you'd like to see if Buffini Leadership Coaching is right for you, schedule your complimentary leadership consultation using the URL on your screen.